So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ji Leong Ko. I'm the founder of the Singapore Literature Festival. Together with the festival co-director, Lilith Philpott, I want to welcome all of you to the 6th Biennial Festival. The theme... Thank you. The theme for this year is Living Adaptations, and the program focuses on the art of adaptation in writing for the stage and screen. We're very, very grateful to the Asian American Writers Workshop, where we are now, for co-presenting the second day of the festival. Now, this afternoon, we have, for our second panel, two amazing filmmakers here to talk about film editing as a form of writing. Unfortunately, our third panelist, Vasarhelyi, is unwell and unable to attend. But first, let me introduce to you our moderator for this panel, Ashish Ravinran. Ashish Ravinran is a Singaporean Indian filmmaker and alum of the Warner Brothers TV Writers Workshop. Ashish started making short films as a history undergrad at Oxford University and then completed his MFA in filmmaking at NYU Tisch School of the Arts. There are alums here in the audience, clearly. He directed and edited the feature documentary Chasing Cricket, about an NYPD-run cricket league for immigrant teens. So please put your hands together to welcome Ashish to the stage.
Thank you. So, this panel, Editing as Writing, I'm very excited to moderate because I both work as a screenwriter and an editor. So when I was told this is what the panel would be about, I thought someone was reaching into my mind and trying to, bring out something that I think about on a daily basis, really. Because I often see the overlaps between the two disciplines. Writing is obviously writing words. Editing, I often see as writing using footage, especially with documentaries, which is what I often end up editing. So, just to frame our conversation a little bit, I just wanted to start with a quick question. Who here has been involved in any filmmaking or editing at all? A videographer? Yes, okay, great. Okay, what about like editing Instagram videos, TikTok videos, that sort of thing? Yeah, more people, right, okay. So editing is a funny thing because a lot of people have said that editing is the only aspect of filmmaking that's really unique to cinema. Most other aspects come from other disciplines. So writing, playwriting, acting, music, sound, camera, all of that derive from other disciplines. But editing is really wholly of movies in a way. But it's also quite mysterious. It's one of the lesser understood parts of filmmaking. So today we're going to open the door a little bit to the editing room and see what goes on inside, see how it can be applied to writing, and screenwriting, and also perhaps other forms of writing. So to do that, we have two very talented filmmakers, HE Shuming and Benegal. So how this is going to work, the format is basically, they're both going to tell you a little bit, 10-minute presentation about their work and how they make films. And then we're going to open it up and have a little conversation over here in this kind of living room set, and then with all of you. So let me introduce to you the first panelist. Okay, so first up we have Dave Benegal. Dave Benegal's award-winning debut feature film English August is acknowledged as a landmark film in contemporary Indian cinema. It won the National Award, India's highest award in cinema, was selected for MoMA's New Directors' New Films, and was the first Indian acquisition of 20th Century Fox. And it's currently being restored. His feature road movie was an official selection at Atelier du Cannes, the opening night film at the Berlin Film Festival, and one of the first features to be distributed in the US by Robert De Niro and Jane Rosenthal's Tribeca Films. He's also developing a slate of TV and film projects through his company Mind Studio. Their doc about James Ivory, one half of the legendary filmmaking duo Merchant Ivory, premiered at the Met this Friday to a packed audience, and I think you can go to the Met and watch it for the next few weeks, so I would encourage you to do that. I was there, it was a great screening. So Dave Benegal, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. This is not how long my chat is going to be. I'm going to keep it quite short. I love the panel before this that I was here for, and I thought a clip of my film English August, which is currently being restored. What you're seeing is the unrestored, sort of salvaged file that I found somewhere. So I'm going to perhaps, what I'm going to do, I think, is just tell you 3 stories today, 3 very short stories. And before I get to those 3 stories, G actually wants me to tell you those 3 stories, so I'm sort of following his idea and thought. And then of course we will continue our conversation. So the film, I made a film called English August, which is adapted from a book, English August, which is available here, I think New York Review of Books, and it might be on these bookshelves. I co-wrote the screenplay with the author, mostly because we just didn't know who else could write it. He had not written before, neither had I, and when I asked him to write it, he said, I haven't written a script, and I responded, neither have I, so we decided to write it together. And it's a story of this young man who graduates from college, joins the civil service, is sent out to a small town somewhere in India, and he spends a year there training to become a civil servant, a bureaucrat. And the only friend he makes in that year is a frog that jumps into his bathroom. And most of the year he spends just smoking weed and wanking off. That's the movie. You know. But it took me a long time to make, and it took me a long time to convince people that I wanted to make this, and that it was, you know, it's about what you would probably call a post-colonial subject, and it's about someone who's part of a contemporary kind of idea of a nation, however contested that idea is, or that word is, or a culture. And there's this wonderful word, a phrase, which keeps coming up, which kind of also defines perhaps me, is that he keeps saying that he's hazar fucked, which means 1,000 fucked, or 1,000 times fucked over, because, you know, he doesn't speak any kind of language. He doesn't really know his language of his you know, home or his state or the street. He's speaking English. He's listening to all kinds of weird music, as in Miles Davis and Bob Dylan and things which don't belong to his quote-unquote culture. So, like, who the F is this guy? Anyway, I won't ramble on, but let's see the first. There are 3 clips. Let me show you those 3 clips, and then let's dive into this wonderful thing about editing as writing, or editing is writing.
Interesting. Challenging. But I'm afraid ultimately not for us. You see, what we're looking for is something with narrative, focus, direction.
You've got to have a key British character, or an American, it doesn't matter. You know, someone who gets out there, mystique, voluptuousness, lots of sex, the usual thing. Tell you what, why don't you just rewrite it?
Why? I mean, if you take this and cut it up into 6 parts, make a television series.
Yeah, so that's how the movie opens, and that really was something I went through. And I have an encyclopedia rejection slips. It was like at one point, I thought this is never going to happen, and then it fortunately did. And the whole point was that this guy is trying to hawk his manuscript and about his year he spent there, and nobody's interested in that, as they were not interested in my movie. And it's curious. This was made about, I think in 1994, which is like over 30 years ago. I don't find that situation has changed much. It's kind of rather tragic to sort of say that. Let's look at the second and the third clip, perhaps both back to back.
It took me 2 days to reach Madna. Pultu, my uncle, Ira, and Dhruvo had come to see me off. For most of my journey, I slept or stared at miles and miles of landscape. Familiar, yet unknown. Ira was off to Wisconsin for some Asian studies shit. Dhruvo pulled the right strings to get into Citibank. I gave the civil service exam and got Madna. Neera gave me her usual Marxist line about the bureaucracy. Dhruvo scoffed as well. Baba called from Calcutta to say, "Good, I'd get to know the country." But then he's an old world bureaucrat, a blend of Marcus Aurelius and the Reader's Digest. Takes life too seriously. Puntu Kaku, well, it was the first time he approved of what I was doing. 1 year in a dot, miles away from anywhere.
Alright, so he enters the blue room and stuff and blah blah. And then we can see this clip is really for G, this one. So anyway, that was the film, and it just, the guy reads this, he smokes a joint, and he wanks off, and then he goes to work, and it goes on and on like this for 90 minutes. We edited it here in New York City, believe it or not, and when I sort of finished, I sort of done the basic edit, Upamanyu, the author, and I wrote the script together. We went out and made the film, and and then when we were editing it, after a point I asked him to come to see me, to visit me in the edit, and we spent a week together. And on the first day, I was moving, it was on film, and so it's kind of physical, and there were lots of film clips and things. And I was moving things around and rearranging things and moving some scenes and dialogues and doing all of this with him, which I think he found kind of quite tiring, because by the end of the day, he asked me when we were doing this, he said, "Why on earth did we even write a screenplay? Because we're writing the film right now." And so I remembered that. That stayed with me, and I said, "Yeah, it's true, because this is where it's actually being written in a sense." So when G brought this up, and I met G and Lily, this story came back to me, which takes me to my second story. When I began when I decided to start making films, which I didn't want to do, I wanted to be an architect. That's a different story. I got this job. Well, I was going to go to film school. There's only one film school in India, and I was told that it's probably going to be on strike. So it's best not to go to film school because, you know, why don't you come and work with some filmmakers? Some filmmakers said, why don't you work with us? And very soon I realized what they were looking for was an unpaid intern. I don't quite know how I had this sort of wherewithal to realize that's not what I wanted to do. And fortunately, I got a job somewhere else with another film company. And I worked on this film, and I did various things because it was not as industrialized as filmmaking is today. And it was more like working with a theater company. You can do everything. And I was essentially sent off with these thick books, which were all the continuity books of what was filmed, etc. And I was told, go, your job is to go now sit with the editor and liaise between the director and the editor, and whatever the director wants, tell the editor, and so on and so forth. So I was pretty young. I was, I think, like 19 or so. And I walk into this director's the editor's cutting room, and I was late. And so he was quite annoyed. He was a very kind of well-known, respected, award-winning editor, and he was quite annoyed at me. And then he asked me, what do you want, who are you? And I sort of introduced myself, and he said, what do you want to do? And I made the gross mistake of saying, I want to direct. Never ever say that, never ever say that. So he looks at me, you know, and I think there was a little bit of, I was a bit rude perhaps in the way I said it, or my tone was not polite enough. And he looks at me and he points to a chair which is next to him, and he says, sit here for 4 years, and then you learn how to direct. And I actually did that. I actually sat there for 4 years. I had no social life, I had no friends, I had nothing. I would go in the morning and work till really late at night. And then in the 3rd year, he suddenly looks at me and hands me this a marking pen, you know, a soft marker, acrylic marker, which sadly in those days used to be called a China marker. I'm glad they called it the right name now. But and a pair of scissors, and said, all right, cut the film. Where do you want to cut it? And I completely freaked out because, you know, it was not the day of, you know, Command Z or Command Z and multiple undos and stuff like that. If you cut it, you cut it. You just had to make a decision. I mean, you could go back and retape it, etc. But it was, so I had to really sort of look at which is the right frame. Where do you want to cut, and how do you sort of decide what is that moment that you want to cut at, and decide to sort of then create this story or shape the character or the narrative or whatever you want to do with it. So, so that's again where I kind of realized and saw in those 3 years how, you know, stories are actually made. Because I was also working with directors who didn't really write screenplays. They would just go out, a lot like, for example, the director Hong Sang-soo does. He does not have a script. He just wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning. He spends like 2 hours writing the scene. Then at 9 o'clock he meets the actors. They rehearse the scene. Then they go and film the scene. And that's it. There is no script. He just works. This is how he works. And it's remarkable because he makes 2 films every year. The third story, so, you know, actually when I finished English August editing here, I took the film back to the editor who made me sit on that chair for 4 years. Because I wanted him to see my first film, and I wanted him to sign off on it, and I wanted his kind of approval. By then he'd become a good friend of mine, and he would look at all my work, and, you know, I knew him right until the end of his life. And what I learned there was something, you know, it's very, it's I don't know where else one could have that kind of time to be able to learn that kind of way of writing a film. The third story, I'm a pacifist. I don't believe in guns. I don't believe in violence of that kind. But it's a story of Emir, Costa Rica, and his gun. Emir, Costa Rica is a European film director who comes to set with a gun. And this is a fact. It's told to me by his cinematographer who filmed my last film, road movie. Emir was making a film in Europe, and the television networks and the studios behind it were very concerned because it was taking a long, long time, and anytime they would try to get there to find out why he's taking so much time, he would pull out his gun and start firing it in the air, and they would just panic and run away or hide behind the bushes, etc. I mean, he's not a violent guy, but he would just use it as a threatening tool, which I don't necessarily agree with, but anyway. So the network got together and they said, look, the guy's still filming, he's still on page 4 of this script, and this film is never going to get finished. So they called another producer, a German producer, Karl Baumgartner, Baumi, who was also a very good friend of mine. So I know this story is true. And called him and said, look, will you just go and talk to Emir and find out what the F is going on with this? Because we can't keep funding this. He's only on page 4 of the film, and it's like 4 weeks have gone by of filming. So Baumi gets there on location, meets Emir and asks him, after the pleasantries, etc., like, hey, what's going on, and why are you still on page 4? So Emir looks at him and says, what are you talking about? And he said, no, they're saying you've just not finished, you're not gone past page 4. So he said, oh, I finished filming the film long ago. He said, what I'm doing now is, and he points to the screenplay, and he points to the spaces between the words. He said, you see those spaces there? That's what I'm filming. So the point in that is that it's about finding the poetry. It's where you find the poetry. And the connection I'm making to all of this is that it's when you're editing the film, or when you're in that process of writing it at that point, is where you're kind of also trying to discover the poetry. So, and I think the point he was trying to make is that we become a sort of prisoner of plot. Most of the times that when we see films, most of it is just we're filming the words on the page. We're not looking at those spaces between the words. Emir said, of course, I'm filming the white spaces between the words. I refuse to use the word white. So I would prefer if we said it's just the spaces between the words. So that's my kind of third little tale. And perhaps if we went to the next slide, not this one, the next one, not this one, none of these, sorry, this one. This is an interesting thing because this is from the film that premiered last night. And it gives you a little glimpse of perhaps, what it looks like when you're writing a movie. And it has a kind of, and perhaps we can go to the next one. Yeah, that gives you a sense of, this is what the editor Walter Murch calls like the geological layers of a film. It's like, looking at a river, if you look at the Colorado and you see the kind of layers that it has left, the layers of history, or the layers of meaning, or the layers of time. The layers of time is what he really means. And I think that when I talk about poetry and stuff, it's also about editing is discovering it's discovering the feel of the story and not the think of the story. So it's discovering the feel of the thing, what's here. I think that's about, I think that's, yeah, and so it was really about, it's just, editing is not just writing, so we're not literally writing the story, but we're also trying to discover the poetry in this. Is there some kind of poetry in this that we can find? And I keep using the word poetry not loosely and with great sort of trepidation looking at G standing there, but really what another filmmaker had told me once critiquing a film of mine, which has remained with me till today, is that he was the one who told me, you're a prisoner of the plot. You need to find the poetry in your film. And so I'm struggling to do that. I'm literally struggling every time I'm trying to work on something. Where is that damn thing he told me? You know, where is the poetry? And I'm going to sort of end with this thing I just came across a few days ago by the director Billy Wilder. I'm sorry, just pulling out some ancient person. But you know, he said something quite wonderful which I liked, which is, he said, is it necessary for a director to know how to write? And then he responds himself saying that no, it's not necessary for a director to know how to write. However, it helps if the director knows how to read. And which brings me to the final thing, which is that, you know, editing is not just about writing, but it's also knowing how to read. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. A lot to unpack. I'm glad you actually had the editing timeline up there. Not a lot of people see that, so that was fantastic. Okay, we're going to move on swiftly to Shuming. Shuming is a screenwriter and director from Singapore. He was conferred the Young Artist Award in 2019 by the National Arts Council, Singapore's highest artistic accolade. His debut feature film, Ajoomma, premiered at the 27th Busan International Film Festival and got 4 nominations at the 59th Golden Horse Awards, including Best New Director. The film is Singapore's entry for Best International Feature Film at the 95th Academy Awards, and Ajoomma had its New York premiere last night at this film festival to a packed audience. So please, Shuming, come talk to us about it.
Hi guys, thank you for having me. I mean, what a wonderful introduction to your work, and it got me thinking a lot about editing as a writer and losing yourself in the plot and trying to find poetry in that. Because for me, it was the same thing. It was trying to write a feature, trying to make a feature film it's a marathon, and you oftentimes get lost in the plot, and at the same time there's just so much noise that goes around something like that. That makes filmmaking such a collaborative art form. But I thought maybe before we go into the conversation, I'll just talk a little bit about my film Ajoomma, and which premiered last night. And if who came to the screening last night, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming last night. And this would be a nice opportunity to talk through the process a little bit. We have that slide. So this film was made when I started developing it when I was at the American Film Institute. I was doing my master's in directing, and I sort of had this moment where I would Skype with my mom, and we would have a moment of sharing about our lives, and she would talk about recapping Korean dramas, and I find that to be a way for us to connect. And I wanted to make this film, and realizing that there is such a long journey to find my collaborators, and in that sense it means a producer or trying to find financing and all of that. Putting together a dossier, a kind of document to find my name, basically. And it's essentially a film that was very much, the genesis of it really about my mother's my mother's obsession with Korean drama. But deeper than that, it is who she is as as a woman, and our relationship as she's figuring out a new chapter in her life, and for me to reconcile that with my own journey of wanting to do what I want. So when we had to put the dossier, I had to put together like the visual lookbook. And I got my mom, she's on the left, to pose for the poster that I then pitched to financiers and government bodies to promote the film. I told her, like, just think of yourself winning the lottery, and I want that smile that would hold people in. On the right is the film poster with my actress, Hui Fang. Next slide, please. I'm a film school born and bred filmmaker. Sometimes I find that to be a bit of a handicap, but there's a whole other conversation to have. I was educated in Singapore and I moved to LA to do my master's in directing. As a filmmaker, I think a lot of what we do, whether it's writing or editing or directing, it's editing becomes this constant throughout all of these timelines of making a film. Next slide, please. So I put together a one page. It was just sort of like, okay, I imagine this is how the story is going to be in 90 minutes. And this was the script that I submitted, the one page that I submitted to a film lab in Singapore, where I eventually won a grant to do research to make the film. Next slide. And I took the money, it was $5,000. I signed up for a group tour with a group of Singaporean aunties, and went to Korea. And I wanted to see Korea through the lens of these aunties, and I wanted to see Korea through a very touristic eyes, or very Singaporean auntie eyes. It was one of those experiences that I won't forget, but at the same time, it was seeing so much of these women and the kind of dynamic that they have, the kind of I guess connection they have with each other, but also at the same time, I was keenly aware of my presence as a guy in his 30s traveling alone, and I have to kind of explain myself, and because I can't be like, oh, I'm here to research, you guys. I said my mom was supposed to come, and then she couldn't make it, and so I'm here alone. So part of being a filmmaker is also being a bit of a pathological liar on the whim, and then it became all these little requests of, can I introduce you to my daughter? Can I, what do you do? And then once I say I'm a filmmaker, like, oh, okay. Next slide. So then go into writing the script. It took me a while. This was 2016. So just a background on the film, if you haven't seen the film, it's about a Singaporean auntie, a Singaporean middle-aged woman who is obsessed with Korean drama. She joins a group tour to go to Korea and gets lost, and she has to kind of find her way back to rejoin the tour. So it's a bit of a road trip, a road movie where she rediscovers herself in the prime of her life. The film is primarily in Mandarin and Korean. I speak English and Mandarin, I don't speak Korean. And I obviously have to write a lot of scenes that involve Korean characters, and it went through several rounds of translation, both in Mandarin and Korean, which we sent it for translation. And Mandarin I could kind of read and then make notes and make changes. But with Korean, I had to really fully trust the translator to work on the dialogues or work on all these nuances that I wouldn't have any insight into. So it was a lot of trust to my collaborators. Next slide.
But the translation, I mean, the editing also continues as I'm writing drafts over drafts and working with actors. That changes things for me, because in that sense, the process of working with actors, I needed to hear these lines that I wrote, and that they would be able to understand the nuances or give insights into things that I might not have as a writer, and I've become so attached to it that they could sort of take me out of provide a bit of distance, I guess. So there was months of working with them to workshop these lines, and so that when we were on set, it's not like Hong Sang-soo where in the morning you write a script and then you go shoot it. This is the complete opposite, where because of the fiscal responsibility as a director to my producer, I need to make sure I don't go over time. I need to make sure that everything is right there. And I do sometimes wonder, like, would you lose the poetry of all of these scenes? But then it means working in a very different way. So, but for this film, it was very clear the function of working was to make sure that we workshop the hell out of everything, so that when we're on set, we understand what we need to do, we understand what the story requires, and then go with it. Next slide, please. And so this is the film that I spent about 7 years writing, rewriting, working with a co-writer to bring in perspective to the film, working with the actors, and going on set shooting it, but then before going into the actual editing, working with editor. Next slide. And in Korea, one of the things that they do, which for a lot of, I guess, mainstream films or production, whether it's television or film, oftentimes you work, and this is new for me, besides doing commercials, where you work with a storyboard artist, but for a film like this, I spent months working with my cinematographer, my script supervisor, and a storyboard artist to literally go through every line, every scene, and draw it out. And that process to me was quite new, because I understand the pre-visualization of these scenes and translating it from words to how you're gonna see it on screen. But to draw it out is also a form of editing that I never thought that I had to do before, because then you have new insights into, okay, we are blocking it in my head. I'm not working with actors to block the scene, but I'm working with someone who is literally drawing diagrams out, looking at images about location, and then thinking, okay, this is how we're gonna flow with the scene. And it was quite an arduous process. I quite enjoyed it, but my script supervisor was like, oh my god, this is the most arduous process ever to draw everything out, and then it kind of takes the magic a little bit away, and I can see that, but the function of the storyboard process is just so that everyone that's working on the film knows what exactly we're doing, and it's more than anything a communicative device, that we're all on the same page, whether you're the stunt person, whether you are the cinematographer, the production designer, and it became a book that everyone would carry with them. It's like a little comic book of the film, but in a visual form, which for me it became, I don't think I referred to it once on set, but it was a nice little memento, I guess, but the crew had to rely on it. So this was a storyboard for a particular scene in the film where there is a car chase scene. And it's the first time we see our main character, the auntie, who surprised everyone by actually she actually knows how to drive. It gives her a bit of agency in the film. I guess for me it was more about, I have to shoot a car chase scene that's way beyond. It's all, I don't know if it's something I'm able to do. It's very butch. It's very, very technical. But I want to, I understand the drive to the scene and so anyway, we drew it out, but this was really like 50% of what it is, and then it requires so much coverage, but eventually this is the scene that we ended up having on film. It's like,
Give me one moment, sorry.
the car chase scene took a week to shoot, well, 2 days, and then a lot of pickup shots. And I realized just how much coverage one needs to create a 5-minute scene. And yeah. It's the film itself also, I think, earlier there was a conversation that I had about drawing the line of Korean drama and the melodrama of a medium like Korean television, or as close as you get to soap opera, and something that is more cinematic. And the film itself is all of these moments where it's toying between the lines of what you see on Korean drama and the tone of it, and allowing the audience to get into the world of the Singaporean auntie who sees everything in Korea as something that could be something that she watched on screen. So yeah, I mean, I think we could. Anyway, that's just kind of what I wanted to kind of go with in terms of the process. And next slide. I mean, that's pretty much it, really. I guess we should maybe go into a conversation about editing. That's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Shuming. Thank you for taking the car chase scene and filtering it through a Singaporean auntie's perspective, much needed perspective. Shuming and Dave, would you like to come up and take a seat on the green couch? And we can start a conversation about editing as writing. So I think we have about 20-25 minutes to do this. So I'm going to just start with some questions, and if you have questions, start thinking about them. We can open them up to all of you in a while. So just to start, we have writers of different kinds in the audience, and whether you're doing academic or creative writing, writers all know that writing is rewriting. So I just wanted to ask both of you, in your own processes in the editing room, how much flexibility do you give yourselves to rewrite or restructure, and what that looks like?
I know it's a bit awkward talking about editing to authors and writers, and I think the whole relationship between authors and editors is kind of quite vexed, at least from what I hear from my author friends, you know. Editors keep asking for rewrites and stuff. But the issue of writing in film is even more problematic because everybody thinks they can rewrite the damn thing, you know. Everyone thinks they can rewrite a script, or they know how to write a script, or everyone thinks that, you know, when they see a draft of the film, everyone has notes. Like, everybody has a view. And then, of course, it gets to, for example, you know, it gets to the other level when you deal with state censorship, where the film is also being rewritten in a way. But I think, to respond to your question in terms of editing, I tend to spend a little too much of time editing, and not that I drive my editors crazy, but I do like to explore different things while I'm working. There are certain things that, you know, you work on, and when you arrive at a moment there, you feel that, yes, there is something about it that seems to work. And once again, it's really, as I keep going back to that sort of line, it's about the feel of the thing and less of the think of the thing. So it's all about how does it feel, and that's the most important thing when you're working on a film. You have to work on how it feels and how someone who's viewing it will feel when they're watching it. It sounds a bit loosey-goosey, but you know, you try and kind of arrive at that. So when I'm working on essay films and non-fiction films, which I rarely do because I'm not good at that, then I tend to work with a different person who is myself, and I just go on and on. But when I'm working on narrative, I work with some other very good editors. Interestingly, on the last movie that I did, Craig McKay was one of the consulting editors, and I usually call on a consulting, someone to come in, which is not a reflection on the capabilities of my editor, but just we want another person to just have a look at it, who is an editor and who's not like some sort of producer or friend or, you know, whatever. And Craig was wonderful because he's edited a film which I really absolutely loved and I saw long back, called Reds. And with Warren Beatty, and then he also did Silence of the Lambs, and he's done a whole bunch of films. But he was remarkable because when he came into the editing room, he looked at the film which we had edited, which my editor had edited, and he sat down and started telling us where the first act was. You know, I'd written the script. I don't know where the first act was. I frankly don't know any of that, honestly. But he sort of pointed out, this is where your story begins, this is what happens here, this is what happens here, and then he would sort of fine-tune that, and it was remarkable because it was working with a genius, really. And he would then, of course, go on to kind of comment on things like, you know, how can you sharpen characters, how can you sharpen the voice of a character, just through the edit, just through one frame here, one frame there. So that was kind of absolutely wonderful to be in the room with him, and I learned a lot.
Shuming?
I think when I'm in the writing process, I remember I remember working with a script doctor, and he brought up this sort of process where it's such a lonely job to be a screenwriter, basically, or a writer-director, where you're alone for a big part of the process. And I sort of keep that quite sacred, where, okay, I'm writing this draft for a while before I kind of decide to open it up to people to read it, because I need fresh perspective, or I need someone to give me some, I've been doing it for so long, I need some distance to it. But that moment, once you open it up, that's it, there's no turning back, you know. And so then these sort of feedback that comes in, for me, it's to think about questions I might have, that how they respond to the script or the draft would then inform myself in my process of, maybe, I guess my instincts were right about certain things, about certain scenes or certain flow of the script. And it goes in the same way with, once I go into all of that, pre-production and production, and when we go into editing, I spend a lot of time really after shooting, as my editor put together as what we call an assembly of the film, very closely to the script. And it's one of the scariest moments, I feel like, because then you realize you spend years working on the script, filming it, and then you watch the assembly of your edit, and you realize, what the fuck did I just do? This is horrible. And then the editor will come and go like, okay, this is just based on the script. Let me show you what I've cut that I think go beyond the script, and let's not follow it. Let's just go with we're not going to be so close to how you wrote it and how you've written it, and then you work from there. And for me, I think I try to maintain that distance with my editor, where I trust that she has an insight to certain things that I don't, and then we talk about it. I find it to be, I'm not super like it has to be this way. I do trust my editors to think what is best with the film.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think a lot of filmmakers. Yeah,
It was
please go ahead.
That was
David.
just wonderful what you said, absolutely. And it reminded me of something that happened on my second feature, which was being edited by an absolutely terrific editor, and who's sadly not alive anymore. And it was based on a script which was written by a writer, a friend of mine, and it had won some awards or something. And so she took this script and she asked me, she said, I'm going to start editing and I need a week. Can I just spend a week by myself and I'll look at your script and I will edit this? And I said, sure, go ahead. And she spent about a week or 10 days. And then she called me in to watch the film which she'd edited based on the screenplay. And I looked at it, and we both watched it, and then after watching it, I looked at her and I said, "This is just awful." And she said, "Isn't it?" I said, "Yeah, this is horrible." She said, "I followed the script." I said, "Oh my God, just throw that damn thing out of the room. And can you please go and make the film now? Can you go and write the film now?" I didn't say make the film, go write the film now. And then she spent another 2 weeks, and she got to the film. And I think the point there is that what I learned from that was, and what I also learned from that gentleman who told me to sit on the chair for 4 years, is that the film starts speaking back to you. You know, it starts telling you who it wants to be and what it wants to be. And you can feel that. I mean, if you're in that space, you can actually feel that. And the more you try and impose yourself on it, the more it sort of, you know, can become a mess. Whereas if you just let it be, again, it sounds kind of very vague and amorphous, but it actually does work. So I loved his story.
Yeah, thank you both for that. That's true. It's vague and amorphous, but it's also like a very physical process when you're sitting in front of the editing station and doing it. So let's just dig a little bit deeper into that. For example, in Ajoomma, it's multilingual, and you have all these characters connecting across language barriers. So I'm curious if there were moments that were there in the dialogue and the script that you then took into the edit and you realized, no, this can be maybe conveyed without dialogue or through some other aspect. Because there are a lot of beautiful silent moments or other moments that you create in Ajoomma. So I'm just curious what that process was like about in the edit.
I think Dev, just now earlier you said something about the space between lines. And it's one of those things that you can interpret it in so many ways, but that the space is one of the hardest things to kind of massage and maneuver, and you have to let the film, you have to surrender to the film, and it will find a way in. But with the language, with the lines, a lot of times, and this is one thing I tell my actress to do, and we talk a lot about subtext. We talk a lot about, okay, the line says this, oh, you're gonna say this, but the meaning behind that is something else. And it's a phrase that she actually taught me to kind of like, it's just a lot easier if you tell me this, or if you give me this direction. In Chinese, she would say, 你吃下去, so you eat it in. So if I tell her to think about like, oh, the sort of intended emotion that the character or the journey this character might go through would come to this, from A to B would be this. And you're supposed to sort of, I don't want to kind of say like, oh, you have to feel this. I can't dictate that. Like I wrote it, but then you might feel a certain different way, and then you as an actor, you as a character have to feel it, and then we would, as an audience, I can then understand or at least perceive that, how do I put it? Like how you would receive something that you have felt. And I always tell her, if you feel it, I will feel it, and the audience will feel it. You can't just be angry or something. There has to be some sort of motivation. So she would say, just if it becomes a shortcut direction where I would do something and it's very obvious with like if she say a line or whatever, and I would tell her, you just gotta eat it in, you just gotta eat it, and eat the lines, and she understood what that meant, and she would try something else, and it would be, okay, I wouldn't maybe say the line, but you would understand what the meaning of it is, and the scene would flow beautifully, I think, in letting it surrender, and yeah, I think a lot of it is just surrendering to the film. The film would have a life of its own.
Thank you for that. So, okay, moving on to the audience. We're going to open it up to some questions from the audience if people have questions they'd like to talk about or discuss. We'll have a mic coming around.
All right, hey, forgive me if this question's a bit hyper-specific for Dev, but that first clip that you showed us where, it's going through the main character and he's being berated by all the men behind the desk, and there's three of them, and in the last two men during the conversation, it cuts to him, the main character, as he's kind of looking despondent. But that doesn't happen with the first guy. Instead, it cuts to like that shot with all the shots of his hand moving forward. And I was really wondering what was the intention behind that choice to do that instead of cutting back to the guy like you would have for the other two.
Thank you for that question. And the idea there was that I was, and I still am, being forced to try and tell a story in a simplified, reductive, what they call distilled way, so that some audiences can understand it. And I'm being very ambiguous about some audiences. You know what I mean. Whereas I'm talking about worlds and cultures that I come where we speak at least 3 to 5 languages. I speak 4 languages myself, some of them not very well. But you speak the language of the home, your street, your state, and so on and so forth. We're not bilingual, sometimes we're trilingual, whatever, it is. So the point was that this British guy, who was a British guy from some television network, BBC, who was trying to force me to kind of simplify, because I don't understand your world. I need to understand your world. And I said, no, I need to tell the story the way the character wants to tell the story, and the complexity of his world, the fact that, of what it means to be a post-colonial subject, what it means to be living with all these multiple worlds in your head. You don't even know that, as in the guy who's doing that. So this whole idea of him trying to sort of set this kind of, to straitjacket the narrative, to straitjacket a culture, to straitjacket, people, is what I was trying to kind of sort of counter with that absurd thing of him doing that. So I didn't just want it to be like a simple kind of, back and forth, over the shoulder cut between the guy and his fellow. But eventually you see who the character is. I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
Thank you.
For Shuming, I was just curious, for Ajoomma, did you kind of shop the option of having a different ending in which Ajoomma does get together with the Korean? Or is that too Hollywood?
I owe, for every time I get asked that question about all the movies I've done, I would be a very rich man. No, I get that. I think I wanted to leave it quite open, where you get to decide how you hope that they would eventually have a blossoming friendship or beyond. And I always kind of joke at meetings where I'm like, yeah, it's a setup for a sequel called Ajoomma. To this point of view, and it's about a middle-aged man, coming of age, late coming of age. But in my original script, in my original draft, for a while, it was not so uplifting. It was just her going back to her life in Singapore, and then it's not life changing, to be honest. And I wanted it to be kind of like, oh, well, she had this episode that was interesting in that moment, but then when she goes back, that's it. Life goes on and there's a routine. So then you get notes from the producers. It's like, you make people feel a little hopeful, and so that again, it becomes like I've always I don't want in any of my production, it doesn't I don't. When the time comes, it becomes. When the time of making decision becomes by committee, I think that's when I'll be like, okay, that maybe I should not do this anymore. But you get notes and then you reflect on it and you're like, okay, this is what the film wants. Actually, I wanted to add on about editing where you go through all these processes, and it just reminded me of it changes again when you do subtitles, and it's oh my god, it's such an art form, and for my film, because of the kind of budget that we have, I have to obviously do, me and my producer will do the subtitles, and then we go through different rounds, but it's going with the dialogue and then thinking, okay, how does it sound in English? Because it for a lot of the audience, they're not going to understand Korean or Mandarin, and so what they're relying on is also on what they're reading, and that is in itself another form of editing that's like, that we don't talk a lot enough about. A lot of subtitle professionals who have to do that, and they translate some of the words and make it sound right, because a lot of it is the nuances in the language. And I don't understand a lot of the Koreans. I can kind of get it, but then I have to work with someone who's like, okay, if we translate that nuance of the Korean language into English, it would be this. In the for Mandarin, I could maybe, in English, I could kind of like, I understand how I can, okay, this would be the right word to use. That is efficient, that is, more than anything, is efficient, but it's also closest to how the characters are speaking. Anyway, just thought about it before I forget.
Thank you. I have a more of a open-ended question for whoever wants to answer it. So both of you kind of mentioned how, you know, the work that you do is really portraying poetry and portraying the spaces and how it's feeling more than thinking. And also both of you mentioned how whether it's based on experiences or based on a person, like the work that you do is, you know, personal. And so poetry is always like up to interpretation. Everyone has their own interpretation of it. And so when you have so much like power in your hands as to how the film can go, do you have a like certain interpretation that you're trying to portray, but at the same time you're collaborating with a lot of people, they have their own ideas. So do you, like how does it work in terms of working with other people and how they might kind of shift it so that your work is portrayed in a different way? How do you deal with that, or do you not?
I think you should go for that question.
So the film is very, at its core, it's about a woman, it's about a mother, and I wouldn't say it's based on my mom, but it's based on this character is a woman who is all of these, you know, she's a mom, she's a doctor, she's all of these things. And with my actress, when we worked together, when we workshopped it, it wasn't so much of creating, it was creating this character where you're like, okay, she's drawing from her experience as a mother, but she's not this person. She understands these motivation and intentions and all of that. So she inserts that part of her into this character, and all these people she knows, her own mother, her sister who is also a mother, all of these to form a character who is real and you believe exists. In the same vein with my other collaborators, I take it in a way where it's about a story about this woman. So when I speak to my wardrobe designer, my costumer, my makeup artist, my cinematographer, even my editor as well, and I would usually start off with like a very basic line of every decision that you make, whatever that she's wearing, how her hair would flow, what props we're going to use that relates to her, what would your mom do, or what would your mom choose to wear, and use that as a way to inform the creative decision that you would make. So then, for me, it's also spreading that ownership of the film to the people I've been working with, where I hope if in a sort of naive way that maybe they see their own mothers in it and they have some sort of ownership to it. Because I don't necessarily believe like, yes, I wrote this film, it's a film by HE Shuming, but I don't think I can make this film by myself. It is really such a collaborative art form that if I have to bring my intentions out, I want to make sure that the people who are working on it understand the poetry of it, interpret it in their own way, and they have their own agency to do that.
Thank you.
And I think adding to that, which is actually wonderful, that I think it's also very important in this to be able to listen. So while one might have, as you said, the very clear ideas about what one wants to do and share that with the team, but it's also important in that attempting to find that poetry, is the ability to just listen.
I have one final question for us, very quickly for Shuming, because I know we're running out of time. I was told by G that you tricked Yojingo to be in Ajoomma, and I wanted to know if you could quickly tell us that story.
Weren't you there at the Q&A last time talking about that?
I was, but I don't know if everyone else knows it. It's a good story.
If you've seen the film, if you've not seen the film, she watches this Korean drama that stars. I have to write a Korean drama into the film because I've had people who watch the film in festivals where they're like, I don't remember seeing this drama with Yojingu. I'm like, it's not real. It's like, write it, create this drama, and anyway, so Yojingu was with he co-star. He's a very big time Korean actor. He's sort of known as Korea's son. He started out his career as a child actor, and he's now this wonderful actor with film and television credentials. He's like an idol almost. And he started with Mr. Jung Do-won, who played the Ajushi in the film, the old middle-aged security guard in the film. And they were in the film, and they were in a drama series together with IU. And so when I had to find this Korean big-time actor in the film, I had a whole list of A-list actors. And obviously my producer's being very nice. He's like, oh, yeah, we can reach out to them and see if they want to appear in your film. And there's an Excel sheet where every day I see like, he said no, 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 and then, and Yojingu, I think, the way my producer pitched it to him was that Mr. Jung Do-won is going to be there. And so he said yes. But on set, I think he didn't read the script. He just read the sides. And they kept asking me like, oh, do I have scenes with him? And I have to tell him, oh no, like I mean, why would you? You're in a Korean drama written for the script. And so, but I think he kind of said yes because of that. Anyway, yeah.
Thank you, Shuming. I have one final quick question for both of you. Just thinking about the future and how we consume media, bite-sized forms, social media, TikTok and all that. Do you think that's changing the way that you guys approach editing and writing? And you can just answer as long or as short as you want.
No.
I think it's an epidemic. I was reading somewhere that I was very affected by it, where I was reading an article about how college students, I think in the US or I can't remember where it is, but they're having trouble with students who are English literature majors who don't know how to read a novel. And to me that is such that sentence just sounds like hell. And I do truly believe it's just the way we consume social media.
With that, I'd like to thank Dave and Shuming again.